Notary slid the folder across the conference table and said, "Miss Calloway, this property has been in your name since you were 6 years old." I didn't understand what he said at first. I thought I'd misheard him. I looked at my aunt, who was sitting beside me, and she had gone completely still, the kind of still that a person gets when they already know what's coming and have been dreading it for years. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you repeat that?" He did. And that was the day I found out that my grandmother had left me her house, a 4-bedroom craftsman in Asheville, North Carolina, worth somewhere around $740,000 by current estimates, and that my parents had sold it 11 years earlier without ever telling me it existed. I need to back up, because the house is only part of it. My name is Elara. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Raleigh in a house that always felt slightly too small for the tension inside it, with parents who I spent most of my childhood trying not to upset. My brother, who is 4 years older than me, was the kind of kid who could do no wrong. Not because he was particularly good, but because my parents had decided somewhere early on that he was the one who mattered. I don't say that to sound bitter, I say it because it was observable. It was just a fact of our household, the way the water pressure was low in my bathroom and the heat never quite reached my room in January. My brother got a car for his 16th birthday. I got a card and a $20 bill. My brother's college tuition was paid in full. I took out $47,000 in student loans and worked 30 hours a week at a coffee shop to cover the rest. My brother got a down payment gift of $60,000 when he bought his first home at 26. I didn't even know that was something parents did until I overheard my mother telling her friend about it on the phone, using the word investment like it was perfectly normal. I never said anything. I told myself it was fine. I told myself that families are complicated and that maybe I just hadn't proven myself yet. Maybe there was some version of me that would eventually earn the same warmth that seemed to come to my brother for free. My grandmother, my father's mother, died in February of this year. She was 83. She had dementia for the last 2 years of her life, and before that she lived alone in Asheville in the house she and my grandfather had bought in 1978. I had always loved that house. When I was little, she would let me sleep on the screen porch in the summer, and I would lie there listening to the rain on the roof and feel safer than I ever felt anywhere else. The last time I visited her before the dementia got bad, she held my hand and said, "You know I've always worried about you." I thought she meant in the way grandmothers worry. I told her not to. She looked at me for a long time and then said something I filed away and forgot. Everything I had, I tried to make sure of. I didn't know what she meant until the reading of the will. My parents did not tell me when the will was being read. I found out about it afterward, through my aunt, my father's sister, who had driven in from Charlotte, when she called me and said quietly, "Elara, I think you need to get a lawyer before you say anything to your parents." That's when I knew something was wrong. The attorney handling my grandmother's estate was a man named Mr. Fitch, and he had been my grandmother's lawyer for over 20 years. He had drawn up her original will in 2003. He was the one who explained everything to me when I sat down across from him 2 weeks after the funeral, with my aunt next to me and a legal pad in front of me that I never wrote anything on because my hand wouldn't stop shaking. My grandmother had left me her house, outright. In a will dated 2001, she had specified that the property at her address in Asheville, along with any equity accrued, was to be held in trust for me until I turned 21. The trustee she named was my father. In 2013, when I was 20 years old, still in college, still working at the coffee shop, still paying interest on my student loans, my father had petitioned the court to dissolve the trust early on grounds of financial necessity. He submitted documentation claiming that the property was in significant disrepair and had become a liability. He sold it for $390,000 to a developer who tore it down and built a duplex. The money went into a joint account held by my parents. Over the following 3 years, that account was drawn down to approximately $14,000. Mr. Fitch pulled out the disbursement records. I saw line items: a home renovation, $68,000. A boat, $31,000. A timeshare in Hilton Head, $22,000. Tuition payments for my brother's MBA program, $44,000. Tuition payments for my brother's MBA program, smaller charges. Restaurants, flights. A furniture purchase that I remembered because my mother had said they found a great deal, scattered across 18 months like a trail of breadcrumbs leading nowhere. Your father was the named trustee, Mr. Fitch said carefully, which means he had a legal fiduciary duty to act in your interest. What he did instead was self-dealing. That is a serious breach. I kept looking at the paper in front of me. My grandmother's house, the screened porch, the rain on the roof. He sold my house, I said. Yes. And used the money for... I couldn't finish the sentence. Yes. The $14,000 that remained had been sitting untouched in that account for years. Whether they forgot about it or couldn't figure out how to spend it without triggering questions, I'll never know. It was the only thing left. My aunt drove me home from that meeting. I sat in the passenger seat and watched the city go by and didn't say anything for a long time. She didn't try to fill the silence, which I appreciated. She was the one who had first suspected something, she told me. She'd heard my father mention handling the property years ago, and something about the way he said it had stayed with her. When my grandmother died and the will was read and my name wasn't mentioned, she'd started asking questions. I should have pushed sooner, she said. I'm sorry I didn't. I told her it wasn't her fault. I meant it. What I didn't say, because I was still processing it, was that the thing making me feel sick wasn't just the money. It was the calculation of it. Someone had to sit down and decide. We will sell this child's property, use the proceeds for ourselves, and never tell her. That is not an accident. That is not a mistake. That's a decision made over and over again every time they renewed that boat registration or paid my brother's tuition or went to Hilton Head. Every single time someone could have stopped and said, this isn't right. And every time they didn't. I didn't call my parents that night. I didn't call them the next night either. I called an attorney named Albright who specialized in trust litigation. She was direct and she was thorough, and after reviewing everything Mr. Fitch had sent over, she called me back and said, this is about as clean a case of trustee breach as I've seen. The question isn't whether he's liable. The question is what you want to do about it. I told her I needed to think. The thinking took 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, I went to work every day. I'm a physical therapist. I have patients who need me to show up. And I came home every night and ate dinner alone and thought about the screened porch and the rain and my grandmother's face when she told me she'd always worried about me. I thought about $47,000 in student loans I was still paying off. I thought about how I had spent years telling myself I just hadn't proven myself yet, when the reality was I'd never been given the same chances to prove anything. I thought about my brother and whether he knew. I went back and forth on this more than anything else. He'd been older than me when the house was sold. He'd been the direct beneficiary of a significant portion of what was taken. But knowing about a sale and knowing where the money came from are different things, and I genuinely couldn't tell from the outside which one applied. I decided to find out. I called him on a Sunday afternoon. I kept it simple. I told him I'd been meeting with grandmother's estate attorney and some questions had come up, and I asked if he knew what had happened to her Asheville property. There was a pause. Yeah, he said Dad sold it, handled it through the trust. Did you know it was mine? Another pause. Longer this time. I knew grandmother had set something up for you, he said slowly. I didn't ask a lot of questions about the specifics. A house was in a trust for me, I said. Dad sold it when I was 20 and used the money for family expenses, including your grad school tuition. The silence on the other end was different this time. I could hear him breathing. I didn't know it was for you specifically, he said finally. I swear to God, Elara, I thought it was a family asset. Dad told me it was a family asset. I don't know if I believe him completely. I'm not sure I ever will. But I believe he believes it, and I think there's a difference. And I didn't want to spend whatever energy I had on my brother when there was a larger reckoning waiting. I told Miss Albright I wanted to move forward. She filed a formal demand letter first. This is standard, it gives the other party a chance to respond before litigation begins. The letter laid out the breach of fiduciary duty, the self-dealing, the losses, and included a figure accounting for the original sale price, plus what the property would have been worth had it been held until I turned 21, plus accrued interest, minus reasonable trustee expenses and any legitimate disbursements. The total was $610,000. My parents received the letter on the Thursday. My mother called me that same afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times. That evening, she left a message that started with, "I don't understand what you think you're doing," and ended with, "Your grandmother would be heartbroken." I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time after I heard that last part. My grandmother, who worried about me, who said she'd tried to make sure of everything, whose house I'd loved so much I used to dream about it. My grandmother would be heartbroken. I thought about what she would actually feel if she knew that the son she trusted to protect me had sold my inheritance to pay for a boat. I didn't call back. My father called 2 days later. He didn't leave a message. The first time I spoke to either of them after the letter was when my mother showed up at my apartment. I hadn't invited her. She knocked and I almost didn't open the door, but I did because some part of me still needed to hear whatever she was going to say and look her in the face while she said it. She looked older than I remembered, which is strange because I'd seen her at the funeral only 2 months earlier. She asked if she could come in. I stepped aside. She sat at my kitchen table and I stood near the counter because I didn't want to sit across from her like this was normal. "Your father made a mistake," she said. "He was in a difficult position financially and he made a poor decision. We have always intended to make it right." "With what?" I asked. She blinked. "You have $14,000, I said. "I've seen the records. The account is at $14,000. The house is gone. What exactly were you planning to make right with?" "We have equity in our home," she said. "We have retirement savings. We would find a way." "After 11 years, I said. "You were going to find a way?" "When?" She didn't answer that. "Mom!" I waited until she was looking at me. I was 20 years old. I was working 30 hours a week and taking out loans to pay for school. You were in Hilton Head. The chin lifted slightly. "You have never understood how difficult things were for us financially." "I know exactly how difficult things were for you," I said. "I watched you spend my inheritance to fix them." She left 20 minutes later without anything being resolved. I sat at the kitchen table after she was gone and put my head down on my arms and cried for probably 45 minutes straight. Not because I felt sorry for her or had changed my mind, but because there's something particular and brutal about being seen clearly by a parent and still coming up short. She had sat there and her first move had been to justify it. And something in me had still been waiting. Even now, even knowing what I knew, for something different. I was done waiting. The case did not go to trial. 4 months after Ms. Albright filed the demand letter, my parents' attorney reached out to discuss settlement. My father, it turned out, did have equity in their home and he did have retirement savings, and facing a formal judgment that could go on his record and potentially involve a referral to the State Attorney General's Office for Criminal Trustee Misconduct changed his calculus considerably. We settled for $480,000. It's not the full amount. It's not what the house might be worth today, in a market that has only gone up in 11 years. It's not this clean porch or the rain on the roof or the summers I spent there feeling like the world was wide and gentle. None of that comes back. But it's real money, and it is mine. And for the first time in my adult life, I am not performing financial stability while quietly panicking. I paid off my student loans, all of them, 47,000 gone in a single transfer. And if I'm honest with you, I sat there and cried at the confirmation screen the same way I cried at my kitchen table, except this time it was something else entirely. I put a down payment on a condo, a small one in a neighborhood I can walk around in, with a porch, not screened, not in Asheville, but a porch. My brother and I have spoken twice since all of this. He's not someone I feel warmth toward right now, but I don't think he's my primary concern. He's sorting out what he knew and what he chose not to look at, and that is between him and his own conscience. My parents and I are not in contact. I don't know if that's permanent. I know that it's necessary for now, and I've stopped feeling guilty about that particular necessity, which took longer than I expected. My aunt and I have dinner once a month. She's one of the few people in my family who acted well when it counted, and I want her to know I remember that. The thing I keep coming back to is my grandmother, and what she said the last time she held my hand. Everything I had, I tried to make sure of. She tried. She named a trustee and drew up a will and did what she thought a grandmother could do to protect a grandchild she was worried about. She tried to make sure of it, and the person she trusted dismantled it quietly while I was working doubles at a coffee shop to pay for textbooks. She couldn't have known. I believe that. What I don't do anymore is pretend that not knowing makes it easier. It makes it lonelier, actually. The thought of her in that house, worrying about me, not realizing that the worry was already justified in ways she couldn't see. I kept one thing from the estate, a small painted jewelry box from her bedroom, blue with white flowers that Mr. Fitch had set aside in a box of personal effects. It sits on my dresser now. I open it sometimes for no reason, just to see it. I don't have the porch. I don't have the rain sound. I don't have 20 years of summers I could have had if I'd known that house was mine and what it meant. But I have the box. And I have the settlement. And I have the knowledge finally that my grandmother saw me. Really saw me, even when everyone else was looking somewhere else. That's what I'm building on. It's not what I deserved. It's what I have. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough to work with. No trace folder is still the clearest image I have from that whole year. A plain manila folder slid across a conference table, containing 11 years of a lie I hadn't known to look for. I think about cause and effect a lot now, not in a mystical way, just in the plain observable way that actions accumulate into consequences, and that the people who believe they've gotten away with something are usually just waiting on the clock. My father signed documents, he filed petitions, he made withdrawals. Each one of those was a choice, and each choice compounded the next. And eventually the folder lands on the table and there's nowhere left to go. That's not fate, that's arithmetic. What I keep coming back to is my grandmother, and what she actually did right. She was a woman who understood that loving someone isn't enough on its own. You have to build something around that love that holds when you're not in the room. She drew up a will. She named a trustee. She worked with Mr. Fitch for over 2 decades to make sure the paperwork reflected what she actually intended. That's not sentiment. That's intelligence applied to love. She thought ahead, she asked hard questions, and she put things in writing. The tragedy is that she trusted the wrong person to carry it out. But the clarity of her intention is what eventually made the truth recoverable. I didn't know any of that about her until I was 31 years old. I wish I had learned it sooner. Not just the fact of the trust, but the habit of mind behind it. The willingness to look at a situation clearly, plan for the uncomfortable possibilities, and act anyway. I've been trying to practice that since. Miss Albright told me early on that most people in my situation don't pursue it. Too painful, too complicated, too tangled up with the grief of realizing what your family actually is. I understood that. There were weeks when I almost stopped. The version of me that wanted to keep the peace, to preserve some fiction of a normal family, was loud. But there was another part of me, quieter, more stubborn, that kept asking, if not now, then when? If I don't stand up for the 6-year-old who had a house and didn't know it, who will? That stubbornness is the thing I'm most grateful for. Not the settlement, not the paid-off loans or the condo or even the jewelry box on my dresser. The fact that I kept going when it would have been easier to stop. That's mine in a way the money never quite is. What I would tell anyone in a version of my situation is this. Doing the right thing is rarely the comfortable thing, and understanding what's actually happening around you requires more courage than most people expect. You have to be willing to look at hard information and not flinch from it. You have to be willing to act on what you find. And you have to find the part of yourself that keeps moving even when the people who were supposed to protect you are the ones you're moving against. My grandmother tried to make sure of everything. She almost succeeded. The rest, the part that required walking into Mr. Fitch's office, calling Miss Albright, picking up the phone when I didn't want to, sitting across from my mother at that kitchen table, that part was mine to do. I did it, and I'd do it again.